think everything about this film is very symbolic, and has a lot of intention behind it. I think you can feel the reverberations of memory throughout this entire film as we see this grieving mother replaying, or imagining the life of what could have been if her child were still alive, or if her child lived, or if she had a child. And I think these images are really beautiful, as they are just like very haunting and devastating. She's drowning in her grief, literally drowning in her grief. And I think when she chooses life, it almost feels like a little bit of a betrayal to her, which is just like very sad. And I think in these water shots, as she dances with this almost like formless, shining version of what could have been, it also like evokes a lot of imagery of a child themselves forming in the womb. And I think that's like, maybe I'm reading like too much into it, but it also seems like that also plays into like this mother forming this life of what she could have been all together in this like oceany space.
This story regarding this mother who is dealing with the passing of her child and her initial inability to cope, which is so humane and so natural of a feeling to see and to witness. It's just truly heartbreaking. And the actress, she did a phenomenal job in conveying the desperation and kind of wanting to um, kind of fill the void of what it feels like to lose someone you really love. And she did so with this orb of light that represented her child. She couldn't touch it, she couldn't feel it, but she could sense it and she could see it. And that was kind of enough for her to be able to um, kind of push away this feeling of knowing that her loved one is gone. Sometimes you don't really know how to process it, and her way of processing it was creating this fictitious orb of light that represented her baby. And um, there was this one shot that I really loved in which her husband or her partner interrupts, and the framing is half of her face because at that moment the orb had disappeared and she didn't see it and she couldn't feel it anymore. And um, because of that, you see half of her face and you can tell that she's empty inside and she doesn't feel whole without her baby. And that was just so heartbreaking to see. But my favorite part was absolutely the water scene. It was so beautifully shot. It was so magical to see and to experience as she talks to her child, and her child is like, catch me, follow me, all these things, but she's not able to. She's only able to really be with him at a distance and touch this entity that represents him but is not actually him. And it was truly heartbreaking.
You address grief and loss in a really beautiful way. I think, this piece is really a testament to coping, but also, um, you know, using multimedia as a way to do that. You do a great job with, the vocal stylings of this, having that echo, acting throughout the piece, and having animation with it as well. I think it's incredibly well rounded, and all of these really build the story. I think you cover loss and grief in a really interesting way, by not only showing this woman dealing with the loss of her child, but her husband also trying to navigate that with her, and processing her grief with his as well. I think it's a really interesting take, and it comes out to create these very well-rounded and grounded characters.
This was breathtakingly beautiful, and the story just really touches the heart. It was gorgeous. The cinematography, I really am a fan of underwater cinematography. The graphics in this were phenomenal. They really were. It was gorgeous. I really liked it. You could feel the actress's grief and her longing for a deceased child. It's one of the hardest things to capture because there's no word for it, and this film did it just well because you could feel her hope, that echo of what used to be, and she's wanting it more and more, which is only human. It's natural because there is no word that to describe what it feels like to bury a child.
very beautiful, but also somber and bittersweet look into that aspect of loss uh, that can come from losing a child. Um, it's a very fantastical view on it as we see this kind of wispy energy, which was a very impressive effect, uh, playing with our protagonist, who, while comforted by this presence, doesn't want it to go. And despite everything, eventually it does fade away. And I think that was symbolic of eventually accepting the reality of losing something that precious to you, which is really, really sad, but an important message to grieve, but also move on from the pain.
This lead actress has this free diving capability, and they were able to get some cinematic quality moments and more story out of it by seeing this beautiful water dance. Was just really, really nice. It was just very beautiful. I enjoyed watching it a lot. She was just wonderful. Her performance as a diver and an actress. And the fellow playing her husband did a great job too. The echo was done very nicely. The voiceover for that was great. The animation looked great, especially under the water.
I thought it was really, really beautiful and really, really, like I said, moving and heartbreaking all at the same time, because you have, these little pockets where she is seemingly experiencing this, this level of joy, trying to play with the kind of memory or the echo or the ghost of her kid. And then obviously that leads to this moment with her in the water, which is so beautiful and so lovely and graceful and fluid, but also so heart-wrenching because she says goodbye essentially. And, you know, I think it's a really, really beautiful movie. It's a really, really beautiful story. And, unfortunately, it is something that people do experience in this life. And I can't imagine how incredibly difficult and hard that is. So to have this, I think, is really touching.